So the great bell curve of us are called privacy pragmatics. And those are people who look at every request for data as a value exchange. And they ask, what's in it for me? There was an advocate at one of our conferences a few years ago who had this great line, and he said, Americans value privacy. Of course Americans value privacy. The problem is that the value is 50 cents off a cheeseburger. And that's right. I think that's very right. Contextually, the value that you place on your own data may be zero. May be zero. For example, I'm a soccer player. If I want a soccer catalog, I may be entirely happy giving my name and address to a soccer company to send me a catalog, because that value exchange is okay by me. I like seeing new products in that space. I'm not a quilter. If someone asked me for my data to send me a quilting magazine, no such luck. They're not getting it. So I'm probably a privacy pragmatic under Alan Weston's approach. So not only, we're building out our matrix here, not only do we have 27 different concepts of privacy, but we have differences within the population, so that what I say is my idea of privacy is very likely different than what you say your idea of privacy is. The other issue here is that privacy is enormously contextual. So a nudist may be entirely fine with people seeing them naked at a nudist colony. They may not be fine with someone looking in their window, a peeping Tom, while they're changing to get to work in the morning. So contextually, things can change. I may be entirely fine giving my data away to get a soccer catalog. I may not be fine giving my data away when I'm purchasing a Christmas present for my wife. So there are all sorts of contexts that not only change how privacy is perceived, but we have 27 concepts of privacy, multiple individual approaches, and no individual is the same thing all the time. We have different approaches given the context of where we are and what we're doing. So that is to say, through all of this, that we can't say privacy anymore, because it's almost meaningless as a term. We need to understand that we are talking about an incredibly complex structure of values and ideas and practices that all go under this broad banner of privacy. So now that we know that it's that complicated and it's that many things and there's probably no single answer to it, let's talk about strained policy responses. For 30 years plus, in fact, next year, the OECD is celebrating the 30th anniversary of the release of the Fair Information Practices. The Fair Information Practices are basically the public policy construct that we have to respond to privacy concerns in the marketplace and in the government as well. And they are founded upon two pillars, notice and choice. We've already heard about these so far. Notice and choice. Tell people what you're doing, ask if it's okay to do it. Well, notice is failing. I think it's very clear to say that notice is failing. One of our largest privacy laws in the United States, Graham, Leach, Bliley, that's the reason you get those privacy notices in your credit card statement once a year. And I'll fess up, I've only ever read one, and I'm a privacy guy. And it was an exercise in my own ego because I wrote it. It came in the mail, and I opened it up, and I said, honey, I'm published, look. And Ralph Nader said that Graham Leach Bliley is the biggest waste of paper in human history. The problem is that privacy is so complicated and data practices are so complicated that to make it legally accurate, we end up with 10-page long privacy notices. So they are dense and difficult to penetrate. Notice doesn't work in that type of context. There's some great work going on right now. We just had a conference a month ago here in Boston, and Arkham Fung from the Transparency Project at the JFK School of Government here at Harvard spoke about radical transparency and spoke about when notice works. And notice works in places where it's very measurable information that can be conveyed in a very quick and easily digestible way. Well, what is that? Well, warnings. This is a warning from a Canadian cigarette package. And I don't know if you've ever seen them I don't smoke, but you can't miss them if you're in a convenience store in Canada. They have these terrible images and these incredibly compelling messages on them. So if it's a warning, notice works. The other place where it works is if it is standardized, measurable information that you can convey in a very clear way. Well, nutrition facts labels, that's another example where notice works. We can understand how much of our vitamin C we're getting, and when we buy Ben & Jerry's, how many days worth of our fat content we're eating when we eat a pint. Nutrition facts labels work. Lori Craner at Carnegie Mellon is doing some work to see if we can move towards a nutrition facts label idea for privacy. And it has been tried and has not been successfully implemented in the past. So notice is a struggle. Choice is also a struggle. Choice is this fundamental idea that you ask people, is it okay to do what we want to do with your data? But in order to get them to understand what you want to do with your data, you have to explain it. And in explaining it, you've got to get through those pages and pages and pages of context. It is very challenging to convey enough information for people to make meaningful choices. And then you need to ask questions like, well, when do you ask choice? Once or all through the process? What do you ask? Is it an opt-in? Is it an opt-out? Joe Jackson, the great British singer, has a song, you can't get what you want till you know what you want. I think that's right. You can't make a choice until you're educated about making the choice. But if the education is coming through notice, we already know that those are difficult vehicles for us to use to educate consumers. The other thing that Joe Jackson sings is, I hate this supermarket, 200 brands of cookies, 87 of chocolate chip. They say that choice is freedom. I'm so free it drives me to the brink. There's some great research being done by Eric Johnson, and I just forgot what university he's at. But Eric Johnson is looking at choice in the marketplace today and finding that consumers don't like making choices. Consumers like trusting organizations. They like trusting organizations and making default choices based on what is recommended from that organization. So they go to a site, they go to a bank, they go to a government, and if they trust that site, that bank, that government, they do whatever the default is. That's what they do, and that's what consumers want. So they don't want choice, they want trust. They want to know that you're going to do the right thing with their data. They don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about it. So if the two pillars of our public policy responses to privacy concerns in the marketplace and in government are struggling, if they're straining, if they're failing, what happens? What happens when those things fail? There's some interesting things, and it's a cautionary tale, I think, for this audience. And that is that use limitations are frequently implemented, and I'll show you some of those. Technological disruptive responses are implemented. In other words, consumers take matters into their own hands and start messing up the data practice externally, extrinsically. They apply a technology to disrupt that data practice, or the business model or the business itself fails. And I'm going to give you examples of each of these. Telemarketing was, by all accounts, a multi-billion-dollar industry in the United States. This fits into the Dan Solov taxonomy in the intrusion category. But it was really annoying. I hated it. Everybody hated it. So what happened? We got the FTC Do Not Call registry. I think that number's actually late or dated. It's close to 140 million registrants, I believe now. The Do Not Call registry is perhaps the most popular consumer protection effort that the FTC has ever undertaken. And to put that number in context, even 114 million, at 140 million today, that's more than voted for both candidates combined in the last presidential election. So American consumers are voting for things like a Do Not Call registry. The telemarketing industry is less than a tenth of what it used to be. So an entire space was shut down. That's a data use, it's a data practice, certainly falls into privacy, one piece of legislation, and it was shut off, basically. And not only that, it was an opt-in legislation. Consumers had to actually go and do something, and they hated telemarketing so much they did it. Another example, this is the city of São Paulo, Brazil, and in São Paulo, Brazil, they were having trouble. They had lots of laws about outdoor advertising. lots of laws about outdoor advertising, but no one was respecting them. There were size limits, space limits, position and placement limits. So what did they do? They passed a law called Cidade Limpa, which means clean city.